Welcome to the Luna Holistic Podcast. I'm your host, Geneva Robbins, and every month on this podcast, we'll talk about Reiki, as well as answering your questions on all things spiritual. We are gratefully located in Calgary in Treaty 7 territory. Thank you all and welcome to the show. Hello and welcome to the Luna Holistic Podcast. My name's Geneva Robbins, and today I have Rita ready with me. Say hi, Rita.
Hello.
Good to have you here. Today we're going to be talking about a meaty topic of how does Reiki help with grief. This is really important, and I find it's been coming up, again and again for people. I've been seeing a fair number of clients moving through various stages and types of grief. And I feel like Reiki has been so instrumental in healing and helping and just releasing the energy of grief from the body, mind, spirit. So we're going to be talking about that. Thanks for being here, Rita.
Thanks for having me.
Yay. Let's start with our collective breath of gratitude. So we're going to do a little meditation just to center and connect. So if you are driving, keep your eyes open, please. And otherwise, you can close your eyes and just take a big sigh of relief, letting all of your energy connect into the earth below you, letting that energy spread out deep into the earth, noticing that life force energy in the planet below you, and that energy flowing through all of the trees and animals and all of the beings that share your environment with you. And just sending out a wave of gratitude to all of the life that surrounds you. And noticing that wave of gratitude returning to you. So each inhale is filled with gratitude, and each exhale is filled with gratitude. And when you're ready, you can open your eyes. Ah, wonderful. Thanks, Rita. How did that go for you?
Good. Yeah. It's good to be here.
Good. Awesome. Yeah, we'll start maybe with how has Reiki helped you with grief, if you don't mind sharing.
As you know, Geneva, I lost my mom last year around this time in March. And so have definitely been going through the grief process and have come through a lot of it too. Also, I went through or am going through, I guess, a divorce and separation in the same year. A couple of different types of grief and loss. And I guess, yeah, just have been going through it in different ways. I've been going to therapy and then obviously doing Reiki a lot of myself. I've been avoiding a lot of the grief. And I've been also just reading and, listening to podcasts and trying to, I don't know, maybe also search for like my best way to grieve too. I mean, especially the loss of a mom, I think I've been hearing and reading so much about how long it can take because your relationship with your mother is so long and complex that, yeah, like the grieving and the loss of it can maybe take the whole rest of your life. It just depends on your own relationships and like what the nature of your relationship was. Yeah.
Hmm.
Hmm.
Yeah. Yeah. I like that you shared like how many different resources you're using. And I think that's a really key point to emphasize is that it's fantastic to get counseling through grief if you can. And then also like leaning into like many different forms of support. I think grief for me and from what I see with people is that it's so complex and so multi-layered. And so we need like a whole collection of tools to help clear it because it is at the level of the mind, it's in your emotions, it's in your body, it connects you to your mortality and feeling
Hmm.
safe in the world and it's a whole multi-layered emotional mishmash of, of all of the things. So it does take like lots of things, lots of tools in your toolkit. And for me, like Reiki's been such a big one for me moving through grief. And for me, I think it's also like I've been in different various stages of grief. It's provided this really like comfortable, gentle space where I can feel the feelings without them being so harsh. So for me, it feels like it gives me space to process the bigness of what I'm feeling in a really nurturing, supportive space, almost like taking the pressure out of the pressure cooker. So I find like with people that I'm helping who are in grief, it's like we spend so much time like managing the feelings or like kind of coping and putting everything under pressure so you can just get through your day. And so when people come in for Reiki, it is almost like a little controlled pressure release so that the holding it in can stop and everything can kind of open up and flow. And then just like this pure energy of comfort flows in for people. So that's definitely the way I've felt it is that it sort of gives this sense of like peace within the swirl and storm of emotions. So yeah, how does that sit with you?
All of those things. I mean, yeah, I like what you said about Reiki being this like safe place kind of to move through what you're going through because, the way that Reiki works is, like you make an appointment, you go to your Reiki practitioner, and it's like an intentional way of going in, and your intentions will be to like move through your grief and actually focus on the energies in your body that are going to be related to that. And now there's a space and a place where you can like actually concentrate, I guess, on where in your body you're having this
Mm,
grief and experiencing your feelings and processing your emotions about what's happening to you and what the grief is kind of doing physically in your body and
mhm,
energetically in your body. And you can bring attention to it and loving and kind attention to it in order to move through it. And I think you mentioned earlier that's almost like speeding up the process in a way, or like not speeding it up,
mhm.
but like focusing
Yeah.
in on it.
Yeah, because Reiki has this beyond time and space quality. And it's almost like it's not suppressing the feelings, it's giving all of those big feelings all the room that they need, taking everything that's been under compression out of compression. So giving everything room to move and let the energy get at it and and shift and flow if it needs to, but also there's a timelessness with Reiki that can give you this feeling of processing much more in a very short chronological time. So there's a little bit of like timelessness that people experience in Reiki, where
Mhm.
it's been a really long time that they've actually been receiving Reiki, but they feel like it's been 5 minutes, or even people sometimes they go into this almost like a deep sleep, but they're just in that sort of liminal space. Or I find when people have been processing a lot and thinking a lot, it's almost like it gives people space or this help to get into a meditative state. So sometimes it's hard to meditate when you're in a really strong emotion. And with Reiki, it's like you get help being guided into that restful space so that you can at least catch your breath in the
Mhm.
storm of emotion. And I find it does work really well with therapy, like, trauma therapy, EMDR, or the accelerated resolution therapy is really good complement to, or Reiki is a really good complement to therapy because EMDR sort of helps move things out of your nerves, out of your brain. And, sometimes when people lose really important people, there can be a lot of trauma around the whole experience of somebody you love passing away and moving through that trauma in many different ways. Like, so I find Reiki helps clear it out of your energy field and clear it out of your body. Sometimes we come to, resolved place in therapy, like you put it in perspective and you reframed things, but the signal is still on in your body. It's still alive and vibrating. And so it helps take people out of that fight or flight mode and into that calmer space so that you can relax and catch your breath a little bit. So,
Mm.
yeah.
Yeah, EMDR definitely helped me in therapy just to connect, I think, the two sides of myself, like my emotional reactions and then my rational reactions were very much like, like we were talking about like how you can go into like this state of like cleaning or organizing stuff, and that helps you move through your grief as well. And I think that is a very rational place to like kind of go into, that you need to go there as well to like process what's happening. And then the crying and the emotions and like the release of stress, like with your tears and things like that are important too. And I think EMDR really helped bring that together. And I think, yeah, Reiki paired with that can be that much more impactful because you can just access all of those things in such a nice, like controlled environment, and like you're held and you're safe. Yeah, it's so good to be able to access that, like to access this,
Yeah.
a treatment like that. Like,
Yeah. Yeah. And just helping to like kind of calm and regulate your nervous system and help even just with like grounding and feeling
Mm,
connected. And because there's so many things like when you lose somebody, your routine can get disrupted and that can like unsettle your roots and, your root
mm,
chakra. And I've been finding like there's a lot of processing at people's solar plexus in their belly. So that chakra does a lot of work for us, helping to process and digest our food, but also processing and digesting our life. And also this idea of like that your identity might change when you lose somebody important, or a relationship changes, or losing a job. And grief comes in many different flavors, and it's all how we process different forms of loss. And that comes with lots of a whole spectrum of feelings, and sometimes all of the feelings all at once. And yeah, so just moving through and processing all of those things and your place in the world. So I find a lot of energy can be held in the belly, definitely in the heart, and, sort of the legs and the feet, just like helping to connect back into, that rhythm and routine now that life is permanently different. there's
Hmm.
no going back. It's a threshold moment. And so navigating the path forward when maybe you don't want to go forward into that new future,
Yeah.
and also making big space for all of those feelings to be completely okay wherever you happen to be. I think that's really important too, because everybody is so different and there is no right or wrong with grief. It's just, I think everybody moves through it at their own pace, their own time. And they're, the main thing is that it's moving and that it's not stuck and stagnant, or that you get stuck in a really acute phase of grief where the loss is very like hard on us physically. Reiki can kind of help soothe that. Like it gives you a little bit of support and comfort as you're moving through sort of the massive waves of processing. The other thing that I always think about with grief is that it's usually present because we care and we love. And the grief is tends to be strongest when we lose people or we have situations change that we actually genuinely love and love a lot. And so one of the ideas is that when we soothe the pain around a loss, then all we're left with is the love. And the love and the joy and the good memories are there right alongside the pain of not having them.
Hmm.
And this sort of transformed relationship too. So that for me, I find a comfortable place to be with loss is especially when I've lost people that I love, is that this idea that their consciousness continues and that I can connect to that energy when I'm meditating and reaching out to them, and this feeling that they can connect with me, but it still doesn't stop the grief of them not being in a physical body where you can listen to the sound of their voice or hug them and that sort of thing.
Hmm.
So it's processing this like transformation in your relationship, or even just when memories come up.
Well, and that makes me think of that whole division kind of like where you kind of forget your root chakra and or you get more into your head. Maybe the whole fact of the person transforming into this like spiritual plane versus, a physical body ungrounds us a bit because now, our relationship is in our head and in our heart more, and like we're
Mm.
thinking and feeling them and hoping and also like going into the past and like living in our memories. We feel them more in this area, like this, like in our crown chakra, maybe in our heart chakra and our throat chakra, like more telling the stories of their life and like talking about them, and they're no longer here presently and physically. I mean, it's
Mhm.
interesting to go more into your head and your heart, and like to lose that whole presence and grounded feeling is probably very natural, but also very important to get back to because life, like present moment living and like life is very much associated with like your root chakra and like being
Mhm.
grounded and moving forward and going through the motions of your day and like moving on with like your routines and your other obligations like as parents and
Yeah.
as yourself, like going to your work and your job and stuff like that. Yeah, yeah, definitely that whole Reiki getting you back into your alignment of
Yeah.
like
And
your
rooting you
root
down
chakra.
into your feet. Yeah,
Hmm.
I really like how you said that. Is like, yeah, you are way up by your head. If the grief is strong and we don't want life without this person, but
Yeah.
life is continuing to happen to us,
Mhm.
and so we have to find a way of making peace with the world and grounding back into the body through lots of different ways. Like Reiki helps. And one of the resources that helped me a lot when I was in an acute state of grief was there's a book called The Power of Positive Thinking by Norman Vincent Peale, Peale with an E. And it's an old book and it's quite gendered and Christian biased and all of that. But if you can get past all of that, I found it very like soothing and very like comforting and kind. And it resonated with me at a time that I needed like just simple advice. And his advice for moving through grief is for men to chop wood until you can't swing the axe anymore, and for women to scrub floors until you're physically exhausted. Is like this sort of like do routine work that
Mhm.
is physically demanding and exhausting.
Mhm.
And that's a way of like, so sometimes we move through our grief with like our feelings and feeling into our feelings. And sometimes we just literally move through it. And I
Mhm.
definitely felt that like going for walks and, being in the world really helped me a lot. And there's something about it as well as like there's a space because you are overwhelmed with all of the emotions, there's a space where it's really like quite a beautiful thing to be working so hard that you can't think about it, and
Mhm.
almost like giving your brain a little bit of a break and finding tasks that are still nurturing and still wholesome and still like not addictive, because there's lots
Mhm.
of addictive ways of turning your brain off, but doing things that are productive and need doing anyway are really good. Exercise I found was really good. It was really interesting because I found sleep didn't really help me because I would just dream all night and I would
Mhm.
wake up crying,
Mhm.
fall asleep crying. And so I
Mhm.
wasn't finding my sleep to be as restful. But the only place where I felt that peace was in my meditation practice
Mhm.
and with Reiki. And everything else felt really bombarded and overwhelmed. Like my nervous system couldn't take any more information. But for me, like I had a very dear aunt sort of suddenly pass away. And I sat down and I wrote my whole Reiki manual for the Reiki class. I couldn't do my regular day job. Like I would sit at my computer and my arms would hang so heavy, I couldn't even move them up
Ugh. Yeah.
to the keyboard to do any work. But I
Yeah.
could write this entire Reiki manual. And I found that sometimes there's a hidden gift of grief, which it gives you really clarity of like, what are we doing here? What's important to me? And it can really focus a person on, if life is random and you don't know when you're going to die, but you
Mhm.
know for sure that you will die at some point,
Mhm.
and this is sort of like a Buddhist reflection is like death is certain, the moment of death is uncertain. And given those two things, what's the most important thing? And then you go
Mhm.
do that. And
Right.
for me, it was not waiting to work on my life purpose or not waiting until it felt more comfortable or less scary or more socially acceptable, but just like, work on that thing that you really want to make, create, get out into the world and not hold back anything from life, you know, so that it makes you reflect on your own mortality and reflect on your purpose. And that's the other thing that Reiki really gave me is this sort of clarity around my purpose in life and what I wanted to do or where I wanted to spend my energy. it really clicks your priorities into place pretty quickly.
Hmm.
And sometimes it can help you let go of things that you don't need to hold on to anymore. Sometimes it's physical things, sometimes it's emotional things, sometimes it's like petty grievances or things like that, like being annoyed by things not, being exactly right or not perfect or whatever it is. I found I just dropped all of that. And then the work of life is to not pick it back up, but to keep that sort of clear priority without all the
Hmm.
pain. And so yeah, so that's kind of where I was at. But
Yeah,
how does that resonate with you?
it brings up a good point about like loss, I think, reinforces the importance of living and your own purposes, become illuminated because you're like, life is short and what is important and what is going to be important in between like this moment of like realizing. And I think you get to see where a person's life ends. And a lot of the time, like you see if a person was fulfilled or if they lived, if they did all the things that they wanted to do. And then it definitely, definitely brings up what you yourself want to do and what you want to get done before, death happens to you. And like, it's huge. Like, and I mean, and that's what makes grief bigger. I mean, it's a huge element to grief is like evaluating your own mortality. Like, I think everybody does it.
Mm, hmm
You're sitting at a funeral. There's no way you can't think about life and living and like being alive and how important that is and how
hmm
it fits for you and how you feel about life and your own life. And so it's another element and it's a big element.
Yeah. Yeah. I
You
think
living.
like the goal of life is to have a giant funeral. To have
Yeah.
touch and influence people in such a positive way that there's lots of people who are sad when you're gone, which is sort of like a jerk thing to do. But
Yeah, it can be. It depends on what you wanted. Or, and I do think that some people would prefer to just like have a quiet, funeral in nature and like
Mhm.
be, one with the earth when they go. And like it's so broad that you can,
Yeah,
your own mortality
yeah,
becomes it comes up.
it comes up. It's kind of hard not to face it and to
Hmm.
think about those things, but I think there is like there's a beautiful part to it all as well, is that to honor those wonderful relationships that you're sad that this person isn't going to be in your life anymore. And that's sometimes a really huge, huge blessing, right? That you've gotten to know somebody like that or have a connection with somebody who is, still human, has all of their faults, but sometimes their faults, even their faults look charming on the other side of it
Hmm.
all. So, and for me as well, like I connect to past loved ones and angels and spirit guides and ascended masters, and I find I've learned how to connect to those beings much stronger through my Reiki practice. And so it kind of, with Reiki, you open up this conduit to the something more, and with that it also opens up for me this sort of energetic connection to past loved ones. And I always just go in with an open mind and open to whatever messages or images come up. But it's been a huge source of comfort for me personally, being able to like connect to these people who are not gone. And then also a comfort to know that for clients and stuff to know that their people are still there. And I
Mm-hmm.
find when people die in really traumatic ways that are hard for the people who are left behind, they're often very involved in helping their healing process and helping to clear and release anything that might have gotten, activated because of a
Their
difficult end.
disappearance.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's interesting because everybody comes with a different, faith background and different perspective. And it's still nice to know, or this, I find it's a comforting thing for me when I focused on, like, I just choose to believe that people live, that their energy, their essence continues after death. And it is a little bit of, I have to for my well-being, whether it's true or not. I'm just gonna go with it. But I really do feel like it is true. There's just far too many instances and information. Like there's just too many. I've just had too many experiences that are weird to deny that that people without bodies still keep on going
Yeah.
and they still keep
Influencing us.
on communicating with us. They're just in a very like light-filled space, and it's been really amazing connecting with that energy. And I find it provides a lot of peace and comfort. People take the best of themselves and they leave behind their ego,
Yeah.
and sometimes it's like it's really the ego that dies at the moment of death, but their consciousness, their spirit lives on. And when we connect with that energy, it's an amazingly comforting when I think of where, my people are not, which is in their bodies, then I suffer
Mm-hmm.
terribly. When I think of where they are, then I feel peace. And so I
Mm-hmm.
just go with that. And it's okay for me to feel the sadness of them not being here. That's something that you just continually process because there's going to be no point where, especially with an important person, there's no replacing that person in your life. And that loss continues for the rest of your life.
Mm-hmm.
And it can also, with time, I feel like it softens and transforms into something. Your relationship with even the grief changes. That first year is hard and brutal. And then it also comes in waves. It's not linear.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes 5, 10 years later, you just get walloped by it. If I smell the perfume that my aunt wears, I cry,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like it's scent, it's memory, there's
Physical.
it's very physical, very
Yeah.
physical. My heart doesn't ache in the same way that it used to. A very, very physical sensation in my body that was not pleasant, but necessary, I guess. And
Mm-hmm.
and getting Reiki, doing different forms of meditation, and working through it and having lots of help and support from my family to, um, help ease that acuteness of it. And then it's just something you carry with you, I think. But
Yeah.
yeah, how does that all sit with you?
Yeah, totally. Another thing that I realized about having a person like a therapist or a Reiki practitioner or a death coach as well. I know a few people who have used death coach who similar thing, like just talks you through these feelings and the process of like what death is, but having this presence of like a person that is helping you focus on processing your emotions is so important too, because you're not alone. Your grief, is being acknowledged and recognized and seen. You're able to like actually voice your grief to another human and
Mm-hmm.
process it that way. And I think as a collective and as like humanity, that's so important too. It's like you're sharing your story and you're sharing your feelings, and your feelings are being seen and heard. And that's an important part of going through the grief.
It's lighter when it's shared, or
Hmm.
just like supported. And
Hmm.
then the other thing that like pops up is just like the power of being,
Hmm.
and so if people are listening and they're maybe not grieving themselves, but they're supporting somebody who is grieving, or supporting somebody maybe who is, dying. And that's a whole, it's a very, very challenging phase of life to be in, because you're in it, but you're not in it, and I always feel like we always question whether we did the right thing, whether we said the right thing. But in those big moments in life, it's more, I think, more than anything, it's that you were there. It's to never underestimate the power of your just simple being. It doesn't have to be fancy. Just show up and be with people in those big moments. And definitely as a Reiki practitioner, I find doing Reiki for people who are grieving is actually like it's very light, because I'm filled with that light energy is flowing through me, but it's also I just like hold that being space, right? And the grief will be there until it's not there. We don't have to rush it away. We don't have to hurry it up. We just have to respect it and make space for it. And then also to sort of help it not be so acutely painful that the person can't function, But it's also okay if they can't, right? like
Yeah.
just it's just that comfort and presence and being, and that's enough, right? Like there's no right way to go through it. There's no wrong way to go through it. It's just the way that it happens. It's sort of like an is what it is sort of situation. And so then you just show up, you just show up,
Hmm.
and that um I think that like never feeling equal to the task of something momentous as somebody's passing, I think is a very normal feeling too, because it is big. It's a big moment, and we're just bystanders to it. And
Hmm.
but being there, being present with people, I think is such a huge gift, especially in those like threshold moments in life, but it's also a skill that you can take into the every other moment of your life. And that's definitely something that I've learned from this process in my own life, and then supporting other people is just, we're human, but to be as present as possible in the moments that you have with people, especially when you're in physical company. So I'm very much like, if I'm with another person, like my phone is off on do not disturb, I don't look at it. you know,
Right.
which makes it harder to get back to people. But, um, I much more would rather like those deep, full, um, interactive experiences with people whenever I'm in person with anybody,
Yeah.
because you actually never know if that's your last moment with them or your last moment.
Hmm.
Like life is random and weird, and it doesn't matter how old a person is. Like, so yeah, so being really like mindful and present, and engaged, and also sort of gentle. Like I put a lot of things through that big filters, like, will I really care about this later? No, I won't care about this later. So it helps me drop things that, my little ego mind wants to make a big, I want to get into a big snit about it. And I just drop it and just let it all go. If I can find the link to it, there's a national film board uh, movie short called The Big Snit, which
Hmm.
is one of my favorites. I grew up watching it. on, on,
Right.
uh, on the show. But yeah, we'll put a link in the description because it's great about not holding on to small irritations when big things are happening.
Awesome.
Yeah.
I'm gonna
Thank
watch it.
you.
I'm gonna find it.
Yeah, totally. Awesome. How does that all sit with you, Rita?
Good. I mean, this is really, really good for me. I mean, I'm still going through it and,
Mhm.
finding all the tools that I can use to move through it. I mean, like I think I told you before, I've been listening to podcasts about grief and, talking to my family and talking with my sister a lot. And yeah, and also just physically going through my mom's things and sorting
Mhm.
out, the physical part of her life, the artifacts of her life, and deciding what to keep and what not to keep. And it's really eye opening. I mean, one person can collect in their life and like what their life was about, like physically, and then now, also being gone and like thinking about them spiritually. Yeah, their soul self existing out there as well. It's so interesting. I really love that we talked about that, the root chakra and the crown chakra, like disparity kind of, or like the
Mhm.
the places where you don't realize you you're not giving enough attention to while going through the grief, and like where you go kind of like you get into this headspace and you start thinking about them. They're out there and like you don't know where their physical self has gone, and so you kind of disconnect from your own physical self, and
Mhm.
your root self and your root chakra, and you don't realize that you're doing it, but it's something to work on and something to heal for
Yeah.
yourself while you're going through grief.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah, that's a neat connection for me too. Yeah, it makes a lot
Yeah,
of sense. Yeah.
yeah,
Amazing. Well, thank you so much for our chat today. It's been awesome having you. I love talking about all of these like big ticket items. I really do. I
yeah.
would much rather have a deep conversation about all of this stuff than talk about the surface things, although I can sometimes manage to have small talk, but I love big talk. So for anybody listening, if you have ideas you want to share about this, if you want to share your own story or questions for us about any of the things we've talked about on our podcast, please drop us a line at lunaholistic.com/podcast and we can use that information and maybe spin it into another episode for you. But thank you so much for joining, and we'll catch you next time. Bye bye. Thank you for joining us on the Luna Holistic podcast. We're so grateful that you are here. If you've got a question, we'd love to hear from you. Go to lunaholistic.com/podcast and we'll answer you in an upcoming episode. Be sure to subscribe to our show on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. And also please rate, because you never know where your little 5 stars will go to shine light into somebody's heart today. So thank you very much, and we'll see you next time.